The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another Staffing Hub webinar. A few housekeeping items to keep in mind. If you have any questions or comments that you would like to ask, please drop those into the chat. We will be responding to those at the end of the webinar. Also, there will be a recording of this available, so if you or any of your colleagues, if you need to step out, or if you just want to share this with your colleagues after the webinar, we will be sending a recording of that directly to you. And third, thank you for joining us today. We're super excited to have all of you here. We love having people in the staffing industry stepping out and learning about what's next and what's working and learning how to operate your business more effectively. So with that, today we are going to be joined by Textkernel, who is a supplier of AI-powered solutions for staffing and corporate HR. For over 20 years, they've worked with staffing and recruiting companies worldwide with over 1,000 clients ranging from niche firms right up to 7 of the top 10 largest global staffing organizations. In this session, they'll cover the topic of how AI-powered searching and matching can help solve the sourcing challenge. With that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Derrick with Textkernel.
Great, thanks, David, and welcome everybody. It's great to be here. Hope and I are really excited to talk to you about this topic. It's something very close to our hearts. So, kicking off, your presenters today, we have myself. I'm Senior Marketing Manager at Textkernel. I look after the UK and US markets. And joining me is Hope.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hope Nattell. I'm the East Coast Sales Manager over at Textkernel. Only been at the company about 7 months, absolutely loving it. But before this, I was selling other staffing technology to the industry for about 6 years. So really excited to dive into today's content, Derrick.
Yeah, and really excited to have your experience here, Hope. So today's agenda, we're going to cover 3 key points. Number 1, the top challenge in staffing. Then we're going to move on to talking a bit about automation and AI for the staffing industry. And then finally, the meat and potatoes of the session will be the practical use cases of how you can use AI-powered tech in sourcing. So David did a fantastic job. Let me just add a few items about Textkernel. As mentioned, we've been around for 20 years. We're headquartered in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. However, we do have offices around EMEA and in the United States as well. We're very heavy into R&D, so the majority of our employees are based in R&D, working on the technology to deliver even more value to the staffing industry as well as corporate HR. And our clients, as David mentioned, include 7 of the top 10 largest staffing agencies. All of the big names are up there, your Randstads, your Manpowers, your Adecos, everyone and anyone in between. But we also count much smaller agencies, mid-market agencies, upper market agencies, amongst our 1,000 clients. So, Hope,
Awesome.
over to you.
Perfect. Thanks for that introduction, Derrick. So to start things off, why are we talking about this, right? Why is this important and why should it matter to you? And what we see here is actually Staffing Hub's own State of the Industry report, which is showing that this year, the #1 challenge that staffing companies are finding is finding qualified candidates. Ongoing challenges in the staffing industry are constantly being resolved through new technology. But the key is here, how can we find qualified candidates, not just find any old candidates? So AI and automation can actually be used together here. We're going to walk through the difference between those two in the next few slides. But using these two together and using AI can truly help with all the top challenges that we see here. But if you are looking for ROI and adopting a technology that brings that ROI quickest, it does make sense to start with the biggest challenge. So today, we're going to be talking about sourcing.
Yeah, definitely. So now that we've told you what you already know, sourcing being the top challenge, let's talk a little bit about AI as an industrial revolution before we get on to the practical applications. If you look back over the last 250 years, there have been certain tech changes that really revolutionized productivity. It started with steam power, we then moved on to electricity, computers became a thing, and now we're at the point where AI is actually changing things and once again, revolutionizing productivity. The key difference here, though, is that while the early industrial revolutions really focused on lowering the production cost of goods, AI is looking to do the same thing, but instead of lowering the cost of production of goods, lowering the cost of production of what we call cognitive tasks. Think high-level thought that you apply in your day-to-day roles. So, yes. So, this brings us to the role of AI in a complicated people-centric domain. As with most operations that have benefited from industrial revolutions, humans are always a part of the key process. The general rule to follow is have the machines work on simple, repetitive tasks so that humans can focus on what they're good at. At Textkernel, we call it AI for humans. And it's good to note that this isn't limited to any particular domain either. It's not just a staffing thing. There's been a lot of work into the topic, and James Wilson and Paul Doherty, they authored a book called Human and Machine, Reimagining Work in the Age of AI. Now, they looked at 1,500 companies across all sorts of industries, and what they found is that firms that achieved the most significant performance, it did so by blending human and machine together. What you need to do is collaborate, right? Humans and AI actively working to complement each other's strengths. Humans bring leadership, teamwork, creativity, and social skills, while machines and AI bring speed, scalability, and quantitative capability. They're fast, they're accurate, and they can work long hours, but we're really good at thinking. So this blend of machine and human to achieve better results is obviously a key driver of future success. But now let's get a bit more practical for staffing. So if you think about cognitive tasks and staffing, we typically break this down into two different buckets, right? You have your vital and mundane tasks and tasks that then require higher levels of thinking. Now, thinking about the vital yet mundane ones, here we're talking about things like capturing candidate data from documents, right? Finding the right search terms when you're putting together a query, or even matching CVs to vacancies and vice versa. These are all vital, but let's be honest, they're mundane. I don't think anyone signed up to be a recruiter because of the paperwork. I certainly didn't sign up to any job for the basic tasks of the job. Now, this is where AI can take the work, which often requires accuracy and speed, and remember, it's vital, and it can take that work off the recruiter's plate. But then what do? Then what does the recruiter do? Well, it makes sense for the recruiter to focus on the higher level tasks that, by the way, they're not suited to AI anyway. Here we're talking about social engagement. Can you think of another industry with more social engagement than recruiting? There's very few that are on the same level. We also need to think about strategic thinking. Or what about in-depth interviewing? These are items where, yes, there's been some progress made into these domains, but ultimately humans are still champion here. Now, it's unsurprising that these items, these tasks, these people-centric elements of your day-to-day business, these are the things that add interest into your day. Think about understanding people, connecting them with best fit roles, and actually defining a portion of their lives. When you introduce yourself to somebody, it's usually, hi, I'm Derrick, and I'm a marketing manager at Textkernel. Think about how important work is to a person's life and how important it is to apply that to your day-to-day job. So to summarize this slide, let's let the machines do the boring work, which they're good at, while the people focus on the exciting work, which they're good at. Now, this seems like a strong way forward to me. Okay, AI and automation. Automation has been the key buzzword, and I'm waiting for my GIF to pop up. There it is. Okay, so AI and automation, some people say one is going to replace the other. Some people say the same thing. Let's just get a level playing field here, right? AI and automation can actually complement each other, but they're two different ways of tackling problems. Now, automation is really just simply following a set of rules to complete a task. Think about when you're driving around, it starts raining, and the rain sensor in your windshield automatically turns on the wipers. That's an example of basic automation. Really simple stuff. Now, AI is different because it actually attempts to mimic or simulate human thinking. You see patterns in data, you learn from experience, and then you self-select the right response, which then brings me to this very interesting GIF. This is a representation of what the Tesla self-driving algorithm sees, and I say sees in inverted commas, as you're driving along. Look at all of these complex calculations taking place for a task that most of us, I must be honest, have probably autopiloted ourselves through some or other times. I mean, how many times have you jumped off the highway and thought, hang on a second, did I miss that last off-ramp? What's going on here? So which is better? Well, honestly, that's the wrong question to ask because both of them have a really important role to play in all industries, but particularly in staffing. A better question is, how do I understand the benefits of these two different technologies, and how do I take that and apply it to my my actual recruiter workflow? Now, this is where we get really practical.
Perfect, thank you. So now let's kind of dive into why that sourcing is the #1 challenge. What causes the pain point to be connecting jobs and people? Using the current staffing technology, how are you able to connect the vacancy with the job? What we've shown here is actually our representation of what we call the semantic gap. It's one of the largest difficulties in staffing is that vacancies express their requirements in one way, while candidates talk about their experience and skills in another. And trying to bring these languages or terms together is really one of the core struggles of bringing people and jobs together. When we have a high supply of vacancies and a high demand of candidates, how can the recruiter bridge that contextual gap to connect the resume and the candidate? If you look on the screen here, when we're searching for project management, keywords wouldn't then bring you to the other side of this. It wouldn't bring you to the resume of someone that said managed projects or has experience managing projects, because it's not the same exact term. Candidates are expressing themselves in a different way than the job describes. If a vacancy lists marketing automation or digital marketing, a basic search or keyword search wouldn't connect the fact that HubSpot is a marketing automation program, and Google Ads and LinkedIn, having that on your resume is a pretty clear example and showing that you have digital marketing experience. So candidates are saying things that do not perfectly align with the vacancy that can then disconnect them to being a good match to that job when using a basic keyword search. In all honesty, a resume can be a pretty poor representation of a candidate. If you think about it, it's just trying to group together their skills and their experience onto 1 or 2 pages in a quick summary. So realistically, the interview stage is a very core and important part, but you have to get there. And although a lot of the important details of a candidate that you would know, especially from talking to the hiring manager, happens within the interview, if you're not talking to the right people during the interview, then how can you be moving on to that next step? And how can you be ensuring you're bringing the best candidate to the hiring manager? So how can you accurately match resumes and vacancies when they're both speaking different languages? And so technology can help. Surprise, surprise. Previously, Boolean was the best option. By identifying key terms that are common to both and creating a complicated search string, it would bring the closest match. Boolean is and was and will be a more advanced version of a simple keyword search. When you're searching something like Java through Boolean, though, you're then going to miss out on people who have experience with related programming languages or have written a different version of Java on their resume. With a Boolean string, you can manually add all the related terms to that search string, but they'll only be found if you've said that exact term that's listed on the resume. So to create a Boolean query, you also need to have that strong knowledge of the keywords that are relevant to the industry and to the role. And using Boolean, this knowledge lies with the recruiter, and it's gained through years and years of experience. So if you think about it, programs and applications are constantly translating human input into something a machine can understand all the time. Let's take this slide deck for an example. You can see on the screen here, we have a screenshot of when I'm editing the slide, I see what's on the left-hand side. I see an interface, it's easy to move things around, and I can copy and paste, add some text. But the machine sees something closer to the HTML or the CSS on the right side of the screenshot. So why do we teach recruiters to speak to a machine instead of teaching a machine to understand recruiters? If you look at a Boolean query, it does look like code or code-like logic. So if salespeople, marketing people, or anyone who's creating a Google slide presentation like this one don't need to be coders in order to put together a presentation, then why should recruiters have to use a rudimentary code like Boolean to find candidates? And recruiters are not coders, nor do they need to be when you're able to give them the tools to succeed with intelligent matching quality, searching capabilities. So to bring it back to that question, why are we teaching recruiters to talk to the machine instead of teaching the machine to understand the recruiters? So over years of experience in the industry, senior recruiters, they become Boolean black belts. They became really good by understanding the market. They've made their mistakes. They've able to fine tune their key terms to become very efficient sourcers in Boolean. But not everyone has that time. They don't have the time to learn and memorize every key term and job title that would apply to the industry they're serving. Even the most skilled Boolean black belts might miss a candidate, or if a single job title, a spelling variation of a job title or skill is left out of a Boolean string. You can spend all this time creating the Boolean string, but you still might miss something. Additionally, the Boolean knowledge of terms and titles is not easily transferred, both between senior recruiters and junior recruiters, but also in between industries. If you've learned skills throughout a very niche industry, how can you expect your recruiters to relearn when moved to a different one? If you're trying to grow your business, move to a different market, and you want to be experts in every market you're then going to move into to give your candidates and clients just as good of an experience, how can you do that when the knowledge is lying with the recruiter and having to be relearned? If you're moving from an IT specialty and you know all about code and developers, and then you have to move over to oil and gas, there would be an extreme knowledge gap for job titles and skills and anything else necessary to create a search string. But with AI, you're able to keep this knowledge in the system. That's what we're all moving towards, right? All this automation, everything that you're working towards is keeping everything in the system. So why would this be any different in regards to understanding terms, titles, and everything that's going to help your recruiters get to a candidate quicker? And by doing this, you're taking away that heavy knowledge requirement from your recruiters and giving them time to actually use their recruiting skills instead of being held down with the constant need to update their knowledge and understand what's necessary for a Boolean string. And with the constantly changing landscape, how can you even expect them to keep up with the knowledge and also pass it on? By having synonyms and related terms built into your search, you help your recruiters save time as well as the effectiveness of the search. You get better results when you include a broader spectrum of related terms and synonyms. AI doesn't just hold all those terms and keep them up to date for you. It also understands it and it contextualizes it. So when you put a string together, just like this one, perhaps with Java and Hadoop, you might also search for pig and zookeeper. But these terms, if not contextualized and understood, could bring up a much different type of result because they're not exactly the kind of terms that everyone's familiar with, or it might be a different place on a resume. So this could very much lead to added incorrect results, as well as missing some key candidates within your database. So tying this all together, what happens when an organization is completely dependent on the Boolean knowledge of senior recruiters? And what if they lose that senior recruiter? How much productivity and knowledge and efficiency of your company is then lost? And what if those senior recruiters are then expected to move into a new market as you expand? How can we expect them to do that? Or how can we give them the tools to succeed? With AI, your whole team has the ability to leverage this knowledge database within your ATS, not just the senior recruiters and the Boolean black belts. When creating a Boolean query, each recruiter needs to have that knowledge. By having the knowledge in the system, you can save time. You can move to new industries, stay up to date with titles and terms and abbreviations, especially in IT. You can just see an exponential amount of terms added every year, but why not let the AI do that for you? For an example, a search for a Java developer. Yeah, a Boolean, you might include a few other titles, but would it also include software engineer, JavaScript developer, or even a developer with a skill of Java? All of this can be done for you utilizing AI. And even though you might be searching by a single term, you're really not, because you're able to search by all of the other related terms and pair together what's listed in the vacancy to what's listed on a resume. A fundamental of AI-powered search is actually intelligent parsing. It's what's extracted from the resume or for the job and then utilized. And this technology is what allows the understanding of the skills and terms. And it also allows your recruiters to actually have a semantic search string generated for them by simply starting with a job or a resume, all of the important terms can be extracted, contextualized, created in a string so that they don't have to do any of those steps. And from there, they're then able to get to the results they're looking for quicker. And starting with a few terms or the entire job description or candidate profile, it creates a stronger and more accurate list of results utilizing that semantic technology and not just simple keywords. And it also allows you to search by every related term in a categorized and understood way. And on top of this database, you can also curate the existing terms to be properly aligned with your niche market and industry knowledge. If you already have a core base of terms and skills that you want to continue to search on, why not combine that with the AI to make it even more powerful? Once you've planted the seed of knowledge within the system, it allows you to harvest more potential within your database.
Thanks, Hope. So now that Hope has laid down a lot of the basics for how we try and cross the gap between how recruiters and hiring managers speak, and then on the other side, how candidates express themselves in their CVs, I think it's important to understand that we're talking here about semi-automated sourcing. Semi is the most important term in that phrase. You're not just giving things over to the AI, having the AI create a shortlist and then moving on. We're not removing the recruiter out of the process. We're keeping the recruiter in the process. And actually, more importantly, we're having the recruiter make the decisions in the process. This is why we are against what we term black box AI, where you put in requirements on the one side and it spits out results on the other side. With semi-automated sourcing, you can actually go in and tweak parts of the query. As Hope mentioned, you can go in and add in your own knowledge, or you can remove synonyms and related terms that aren't relevant to your query, once again, based on your knowledge. You yourself can also assign importance to different parts of these terms. Some things might be absolute must-haves. Others, well, it's nice to have, but it's no good reason to entirely disqualify a candidate from the next step. So if we ask ourselves a question, can a robot really shortlist better than me? The answer to that is no. Not today, not a year from now. I mean, fully automated sourcing that cuts the recruiters completely out of the loop is far off, if indeed it's ever going to come. However, as we get back to those industries that succeeded so well, it's all about blending machine intelligence with human intelligence, which is why it's a semi-automated process with the recruiter in control. Let's get a bit more practical. A quality automated search can take your job description and search based on its entire context, as Hope mentioned. It knows these synonyms, it knows the related terms, it can bridge that gap. But as any good recruiter knows, that's not the entire process. The semi-automated shortlist in hand is one part of the process, but then recruiters go and tackle the next part of the process, which is actually way more difficult. Now we're assigning importance. Now we're understanding additional requirements that maybe don't exist within the job spec or within the resume. AI is not going to know that the hiring manager has a preference for candidates with Big Four consulting experience. And AI is not going to know that the LA-based candidate has a preference for working early hours with mountain time companies. Ultimately, automated shortlisting has the primary goal of saving recruiters time, and it gets bonus points for potentially finding candidates that recruiters may have missed. But ultimately, recruiters is still the most important part of that entire concept. And lastly, just talking a little bit about the bias angle, because I'd be remiss if I didn't cover it in this webinar. We all know that it's possible for AI sourcing algorithms to be biased. There was a very popular example a couple of years ago where Amazon's own internal self-developed hiring algorithm favored male engineers over female engineers based on the bias that came through the training data. That can happen. And you must remember, companies building these algorithms, wow, that's a hard word to say quickly. Building these algorithms, the companies are constantly working to fight the bias and make sure that it doesn't express itself. But on the other hand, if you think about it, recruiters are human and people can also have biases. And that's why two systems working together is so important, because the two systems can potentially surface and make you aware of the bias in each. the recruiter's going to notice, hang on a second, why am I only getting male candidates in my semi-automated shortlist? And the system's going to say, well, hang on a second, why aren't you considering these great candidates that came from a non-Ivy League school? Something to think about.
Awesome. So I think to wrap things up, I know, Derrick, you and I have both talked, we both said the word junior recruiter a few times throughout this because we know the power this can have for the training and hiring process. So turnover within the recruitment industry, I'm not really telling anyone anything surprising that it can be very high. And it's an ongoing problem for many, many staffing agencies. Actually, the Global Recruiter recently posted that the recruitment sector has the highest staff turnover at 43%. So how can this help? I mean, as we start to embrace digital transformation, both of choice, but also because the younger generation of recruiters has grown up professionally and personally in a very tech-savvy world. So as we're struggling to retain and train talent, how do you think we can ensure that onboarding leads to quicker time to value, especially when it comes to the sourcing process? And how are we able to retain and develop junior talent in an industry known for high turnover and an industry known for expansion and growth and moving into new markets? And I believe that giving recruiters tools to succeed can guarantee that success.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you think about one of the key reasons why it takes so long for junior recruiters to actually land and start earning you money, it's because they lack the understanding and the nuance of their industry. And we can't blame them. A lot of the time, that understanding and that nuance is only developed, as Hope has mentioned earlier on, after years in the industry, when you're finally senior enough to become a Boolean black belt. Think about job titles and associated experience. Is a junior recruiter going to know the difference between a marketing assistant, a marketing coordinator, marketing manager, and head of marketing? Maybe. But what if the way those terms are understood and expressed is different in different industries? Let's think about skills, right? Let's use Hope's example earlier on, where she spoke about HubSpot, Marketo, and Pardot as all elements of marketing automation software. Is a junior recruiter going to know that these are 3 different programs, but if you have skill in HubSpot, you can transfer that skill relatively easily over to Marketo and Pardot? And then let's talk about synonyms and antonyms. It's the same thing when we go back to building a Boolean query. You need to have intimate understanding and knowledge of a market before you can take all of the important things into account. So, in essence, what we need to do to make junior recruiters more effective is, as Hope said, sharpen that tech curve. Give them the tech that they've grown up with. Give them the ways to work that are at the leading edge of an industry, not the ways that the industry has been running on for who knows how many years. And let's also blunt the extreme curve of learning, right? The extreme learning curve. And the reason why we want to do that is we don't want to place the knowledge burden on the recruiter, simply because we don't have to.
Great. Awesome.
Awesome indeed. I think that brings us to our Q&A.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions, please send them on through.
Yeah, I think David was keeping an eye on those. David, are you there?
Yep, sorry about that. Actually, Hillary, will you jump in?
As well. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, a couple of questions for you guys. Is there a way we can improve the AI with our own knowledge? Our team has experienced recruiters in a niche field, in this case, insurance. So it'd be great if they could share their own knowledge with the system.
Yeah, oh, that's a great one. I can start off with this at least, Derrick. Absolutely. I mean, at least the way that we've developed our technology, you're able to manipulate the search to add key terms that you're aware of. So if you say you search for Java and you want to add in JavaScript, well, we already do that one for you. But if there's anything else very niche that's coming up, new versions of software, you can add that in yourself. So you can enrich the data that we've already provided by adding additional terms or even removing some terms if they're not quite applicable to that particular search.
Yeah, so as Hope mentioned, yes, you can definitely do that on the recruiter level. And what we see is on a day-to-day basis, you can really flex your own knowledge, especially if you have it. On a higher level, what we do with some of our larger customers and clients is we actually build custom taxonomies and knowledge graphs. And I know those are big words to just throw out there, but basically the knowledge that powers the AI matching, we build and curate that in-house. And with some of our larger customers, if they do work in a specialist domain, like insurance, for example, there's a good chance that they have really interesting, really niche knowledge that you want to bring into the system. So we proactively work with them to make sure that knowledge exists in the system for their entire team of recruiters. It's not just for the people who potentially have the knowledge on the ground. So those are two different ways you can, let's say, improve the system knowledge with your own.
Awesome, thank you. Another one here. Do you have any tips for adopting AI technology?
Yeah, I'll grab that one. So I think the most important thing to realize is AI technology is just like any other technology, right? So if you're looking at adopting tech into your recruiter workflow, whether it's AI or anything else, you need to start at the beginning with the problem. What problem is this tech solving? And how is this going to flow throughout the rest of my workflow? What impacts is it going to have, positive or negative? Have that clear goal in mind and commit to the goal. If we go back to the Staffing Hub survey that we started this on, let me bring it up for reference. I mean, you can see there are a number of challenges within the industry. And the reason why today's webinar was around sourcing is because it's number one, right? So for a lot of companies, it makes sense to adopt and solve for the number one challenge you have, rather than just adopting AI for the sake of AI. And I think that brings me to the last part of the answer of this, because it's a really interesting answer. But the last part of the answer is AI and automation are not magic bullets, right? You're not going to bring this technology in and it's going to solve all of your problems, right? It solves the problems that you commit to solving. It's just a tool. A shovel is not going to dig a hole by itself, and an AI-powered search or automation or any other tech for that matter, these things are not going to be solved by the technology. It's really about committing and winning over the front line. I think that's maybe a third part that's really, really interesting. But as I'm thinking about it now, technology lives or dies based on whether people use it or not. You can have the best tech in the world and it can be super well implemented. But if you bring in an AI-powered sourcing system and your recruiters are they're not using it, they don't understand it, or they don't want to use it, and they're back in their current way of sourcing, well, the system's going to fail, not through lack of the system, but through lack of adoption. So these are just some of the things to think about. We actually, a while back, we did an entire webinar on this topic. It was fascinating. So I think we can see who asked the questions. I'll find out who asked the question, and I'll send you a link to that webinar after the fact. It's really, it's a really interesting webinar.
Great. One thing I wanted to add to that as well is, just like any technology with AI, you want to make sure you're partnering with someone who's purely focused on integrating it as deeply as they can into your workflow. Because if it's a completely different change, if everything's just completely different than what they know and they trust, then adoption is going to be like pulling teeth. And also what I just said there, the word trust. They need to trust what the tool they're using is giving them the results. So it's giving them visibility into what the tool is doing and how it's working allows them to trust it, because they trust themselves. Especially more senior recruiters, they know how they would do it, and if they're able to see how things are done, they're able to trust the technology. And lastly, celebrate little wins. I know we work very closely with all of our clients, and every time we have a power user and someone that's really just got an awesome job using a certain piece of technology, we're able to celebrate that internally to help bring awareness to other sides of the business and other teams to have full impact in helping to adopt that technology.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. A Textkernel question here. Does Textkernel parse CVs from career sites, or does it only source through the ATS that the end user or company integrates? In other words, can integrating the ATS be optional?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. We actually have an entire product around parsing CVs directly on the front end, not actually including an ATS. So what it would do then is, in any in any system, whether we're integrated into an ATS, where we handle the parsing, and there are many. We have many partners. I don't want to play favorites and mention names now, but we have many partners where we actually power their parsing within the ATS. But we can also potentially parse CVs on the front end of a website and actually match those front end CVs to jobs hosted on that website without actually going through the ATS. That's a very product specific question. It's a great question. I'm definitely going to get in touch with whoever asked that after the fact, and then maybe we can discuss that a little bit further after the webinar.
Yes, we definitely do connect to external job boards, but as Derrick listed a few of our clients earlier, we work with clients for all different reasons, lots of different systems. So we're able to work with a solution you're trying to accomplish and figure out the best way to use our tool to get there.
All right, great. Another one here. Where does AI sourcing fit into the digital transformation journey? And should we start with this?
Yeah, another good question. I mean, look, the honest answer, the sales and marketing answer is yes, and please let me know your contact details so I can connect you with my sales team. But the honest answer there is actually it depends, right? What are the biggest challenges that your firm is facing, and tie it back to how do you solve that? Because, I mean, like I said earlier on, AI is no magic bullet, right? AI is not going to AI is not going to solve all of your problems. If you have a problem with candidate outreach, I would say, and that's your priority, focus on a tool like that. Don't focus on a tool like sourcing, which might only have, or which might deliver less value to your business right now. Yeah, it really just depends. What are you trying to solve?
But then I would also add to that is that during this plan, figure out where the tools are going to work together. Say candidate, as Derrick mentioned, candidate communication is first. Start with that, and then if you add something in like sourcing, you're able to not just source better, but then communicate with them better if the tools are able to collaborate. So as you build your tech stack, work for tools that work together.
Yeah, and actually building further upon that, I think one of the key things is to work with a strong technology partner, right? Whether that is a company like Textkernel, whether that's your ATS provider. The whole point is it's a digital transformation journey, right? It's going to take a while, and there's going to be many steps on the process, and different tech is going to fit into different parts of that journey at different times. But if you work with your tech partners, there's a good chance that they have some additional insight through working through with the rest of the industry, or because of a longer working history with you, they can more accurately understand what it is you're trying to achieve and work together with you to solve those problems, once again, on the journey.
Okay, great, thank you. Another one here coming in. Do you measure or have any stats on recruiter productivity improvements with Textkernel?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one as well. How do you judge recruiter productivity? Is it the number of placements you've made through? Let's think now. Is it number of placements you've made through AI-powered sourcing as opposed to traditional sourcing? That's a really good metric to think about. Is it if you're logging time in your day and you think to yourself, right, well, at this point in time, we spend 2 hours a day sourcing. And since we brought the technology in, now we've spent an hour a day sourcing. So that's a significant reduction. That's another way you can measure the improvements to productivity once you've adopted this type of technology. But once again, it really, really depends on what you're trying to achieve. And this is why it's so important, getting back to the digital transformation and what you should adopt first. It's really important to have those KPIs set out in the beginning and understand the problems that you're facing. Once you can understand the problems you're facing, you can measure them. Once you can measure them, you can set KPIs in place. And once you've got those KPIs in place, you know what you know where you are and you know where you want to be. And if you have those two data points, you can then measure exactly how you're going to get there. And I think that's how it expresses itself. So these examples are just two examples of how we've worked with clients of ours in the past to measure their performance and success. But once again, really it depends.
All right, one last one here. Does Textkernel also integrate with ATS and have the ability to send automated texts and emails for outreach?
I can grab this one, Derrick.
Yeah, I
So
hope you
we do. We work with a lot of different ATS systems. We already work with a handful, but we're always welcome to add more. So we're looking to expand our partnerships in that way. But in regards to automated texts and emails, we don't do that piece of it, but we partner with a lot of companies that do. So we're here to ensure that you're able to source correctly and then advise on other partners that we have within the industry that can then lead to that automation piece in regards to texting and emailing that they specialize in. So utilizing tools together can bring to that result. But yes, we do integrate with multiple ATS systems, custom systems, and anything else you're willing to throw at us.
Yeah, definitely great answer. And I think that also shows a lot of the power when you're able to engage with a specialist provider of a certain type of technology. I mean, if you try and do everything, there's a good chance you can, but it's not going to be as good as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've done at Textkernel in many different ways is we've partnered with really strong providers who have a very focused idea of what they want to achieve. And in this instance, it would be things like sending automated texts and emails for outreach. So we have those partners in place. They can do it significantly better than we can. It's important for us to make sure that our integration is as seamless as possible so that the recruiter workflow and the experience is as seamless as possible.
Awesome. And I think that wraps up the questions and the webinar for today. And just wanted to thank you guys both again for the presentation. Super informative. And also for all of the audience on the line, if you're thinking about what's next in your digital transformation and what steps, consider Textkernel. You guys did a great job kind of explaining the problem and then how you guys help solve that. And I really appreciate it today. Last part I'll add is just a reminder, there will be a recording of this that we'll be sending out. So you'll be able to share that with your colleagues. Hope you all have a great day. And Derrick and Hope, thanks again for joining.
Great.
Thanks,
Thanks,
David.
Thanks, Hillary.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.